Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Buhai. First, this hour, we have the latest developments from Ukraine. Ukraine is entering the second phase of its COVID-19 response activities. The Cabinet of Ministers is preparing to introduce the so-called weekend quarantine. Details next.
Increase in the number of beds, medical oxygen and COVID-19 tests. Ukraine has entered the second phase of its coronavirus response activities. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, instructed the government to increase the number of beds for patients from 50 to 80,000. The Ministry of Health promises to provide Ukrainian hospitals with oxygen within a month. 80% of beds will be supplied with oxygen in the nearest future. 60,000 beds will be supplied with oxygen through the purchase of oxygen concentrators. It has already been agreed, and there are already planes that will carry oxygen concentrators to Ukraine. We will develop the network of oxygen supply to medical facilities. According to Chief Sanitary Doctor, the Cabinet of Ministers will introduce the so-called weekend quarantine in the coming days. Only grocery stores, pharmacies and transport will operate in Ukraine during weekend. Volodymyr Zelenskyy believes that a few weeks of such restrictions will help to avoid a hard lockdown. In addition, all elective surgeries will be cancelled in hospitals. Starting from Monday, elective surgeries and planned hospitalizations are prohibited in hospitals. Medical facilities accept only urgent patients as well as coronavirus-infected patients. The situation is extremely tense not only in Ukraine but globally. Due to the sharp growth in the incidence, the whole country entered the orange and red zones. Severe restrictions came into force in 199 cities, districts and villages of Ukraine. Cafes and shops are closed in Tsarychansky district of Dnipropetrovsk region. School children were switched to distance learning. Kindergartens do not work either. Only food stores, pharmacies, banks, post offices, as well as inter-district and inter-regional transport will continue operating. In Kherson region, most of the districts are in the orange zone. However, the incidence rate continues growing. 309 new cases were confirmed over the weekend. Locals are preparing for additional restrictions. They say they support new fines for not wearing masks in public places.
I believe that it is necessary to fine because people do not understand what kind of a terrible disease they are facing right now. Adhering to these measures, I mean wearing masks, we are already protecting each other.
Nowadays, there have been many diseases. My mother works in the field of medicine. She says the number of new cases increases daily. From November the 10th, in the Donetsk region, quarantine will be strengthened in Ugledar, Kramatorsk, Novohorodovka, Slovyansk and Slovyansk district. In addition to the prohibition of the operation of entertainment centers and holding of various public events, the restrictions also apply to educational institutions. Elementary schools are operating in a normal mode. High schools, technical schools and universities foresee distance studying. In Kharkiv, the quarantine in the so-called red zones was slightly weakened. Cafes, restaurants and shopping centers were allowed to work until 10 p.m. The rest of the restrictions remain the same. Meanwhile, the Kharkiv Lab Center recorded more than 700 new COVID-19 cases per day. We have around 200 calls per day. Half of the patients are hospitalized. 8,687 COVID-19 cases have been confirmed in Ukraine over the past day. Ukraine ranks the 10th globally in terms of the coronavirus spread. Reported by Vadim Kramer, Vlada Tsurkan, UATV News.
In general, 115 people died of the disease over the past day. At the same time, 2,277 patients recovered. Most of all new cases were registered in Kyiv, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia and Zhytomyr regions. The Ministry of Health of Ukraine announced the launch of a call center and the line ministry.
We have decided to introduce the contact center with a single number 0800 60 20 19 for any person in spite of place of residence to be able to get any information on coronavirus and COVID-19 related issues. All the calls are free of charge. It is important that any person gets necessary aid. No question should remain without an answer.
President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy has got COVID-19. On his Facebook page, the head of state announced that he received a positive test result. Therefore, he goes into isolation but continues walking. Besides, according to his social media page, chairman of the president's office, Andriy Yermak, was also diagnosed with COVID-19. The counting of votes in the United States is almost over. The majority of experts predict former Vice President Joe Biden's victory. How will the US-Ukrainian relation change in case he officially becomes President of the United States? Our correspondents have listened to experts' opinions.
I don't think the Russian people fully understand what Putin is doing. That's why he spends so much time hiding at home the presence of Russian forces here in your country. Russia must press the separatists to hold elections according to Ukrainian law and OSCE standards and disavow the illegal election that has taken place.
This is Joe Biden's speech at the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine in 2015. Even then, being Vice President of the United States, Biden spoke firmly about his personal support for Ukraine and his readiness to help our country with the reforms. Being a vice president, Biden managed the issue of Ukraine. That is, Barack Obama was not that involved in Ukraine. Joe Biden knows a lot about our country. Our cooperation can be much more effective and successful than it was during the presidency of Donald Trump, for whom the eastern direction, including Ukraine, is far from priority. He had other priorities. The Democrats have a different game, and here Ukraine can take advantage of this chance. Even during the election race, Biden spoke about supporting the territorial integrity of Ukraine. As President of the United States, his rhetoric towards Russia will only get tougher, experts say.
He even said, when I become president, Ukraine will be almost the first priority of my foreign policy. This suggests that the issue of aggression of the Russian Federation in Ukraine will be among the priorities in the Biden administration. Quoting Biden, through a coalition with our European partners, we have to force Russia to pay a higher price for the aggression it is carrying out in Ukraine.
The American media are already calling Joe Biden President-elect of the United States, though officially he will become the head of the state only after the inauguration. Leaders of Canada, Germany, Belgium, Finland, Austria and Spain have already congratulated him. Ukraine's president has joined them as well. Congratulations to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Ukraine is optimistic about the future strategic partnership with the United States. Ukraine and the United States have always cooperated in the field of security, trade, investment, democracy and fight against corruption. Corruption is the main Ukrainian problem, Joe Biden says. He compares it to a tumor, and the fight against it will be one of the main points in the US-Ukrainian relations in the coming years. The issue of fighting corruption and the development of anti-corruption bodies will be one of the strategic ones. In Ukraine, this issue is also well understood. In congratulating Biden on his victory, Zelenskyy also mentioned this, about joint fight against corruption. The inauguration of the 46th President of the United States of America is set for the 20th of January. Reported by Vadim Kramer, Artem Holub, UATV News.
Up next, all new tanks. The armed forces of Ukraine place an order to the Lviv plant to modernize the largest batch of firefighting armored vehicles. It's even the largest for the whole period of Ukraine's independence. Our correspondents saw power and capabilities of these machines.
The Ukrainian military used this tank to extinguish fire in those places which the regular firefighting vehicles cannot reach. It was created on the basis of the T-55 tracked vehicle. The new technology can extinguish fires at a distance of over 60 meters. We have installed a completely new hydraulic system, pumps, hydraulic valves from European manufacturers. This made it possible to improve the hydraulic system, improve and make control over bulldozer equipment more reliable. Such a machine is not afraid of fires in artillery warehouses, as it has an armored body. In addition, the GPM-54 vehicle is capable of making the way for other fire equipment. Its high cross-country performance allows to be in those places where other equipment cannot reach due to the fact that there can be off-road or forest terrain. Modernization and complete overhaul of a tank costs nearly $351,000. Over a year and a half, more than 15 fire trucks were restored at the plant.
Деяким по 40 років машинам.
Some vehicles were produced 40 years ago. They were in service, so they had to be repaired and upgraded. It was really 40 years ago. Just imagine the equipment at that time and what can be installed now. The modernized tanks have already been sent to their locations throughout Ukraine. Next year, another batch of the tracked vehicles will be restored at the Lviv armored fighting vehicle plant. Reported by Vadim Kramer, Yulia Bil, Vadim Dmitriev, UATV News.
They detain criminals, search for explosives and drugs. Detection dogs are trained in the police canine training center in all regions of Ukraine. One of them has recently welcomed new trainees. Our correspondent saw them.
The command seat was set. Dog trainer Katerina chose the most active and nimble among the 9 puppies of the Belgian Shepherd dog Malinois for training.
Я вже його обрала після
I have already chosen this puppy after certain testing. It has a search reaction, so it is the most capable for its future profession. It will be a service search dog in future.
The crime dogs are selected first, then trainers find contact with them and later start training the puppies with the help of games. The dog sniffs the box and sits down. Great! A special dog on search of explosives and weapon went to places of anonymous mining and looked for weapon and explosives. Crime dogs are employed for search of criminals, explosives and drugs. Training is carried out depending on the task. A dog can be as calm as a cat or become a killer, any dog. Starting from 6 to 7 months, these dogs can be trained actively. You can already do a hitch, you can already work on the trail, you can provide a search in boxes. Since puppy period, a police dog is taught to extraneous sounds. This will come in handy during the capture of armed criminals. Stop, police, I'm releasing the dogs. Dogs begin their duties at the age of 1, and by 8 they are already retiring. The Kherson police employs almost 40 dogs. Some of them participated in investigating serious crimes. There once was a high-profile murder. The dog found a bag and things in which the human body was hidden. They deal with the olfactory trace, search of criminals and robberies. Those puppies are just starting their careers. Soon they will begin active training in the canine center and later in the city in conditions as close as possible to real ones. Reported by Vadim Kramer, Yanina Lebedeva, Serhiy Temchinsky, UATV News.
That was our final story this hour. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter pages.